Boast busted by Rainbow Double Dash. Lunaverse Episode 7. Chapter 3. The Inevitable Ursa. Twilight Sparkle horn glowed, casting a minor cantrip as she looked out at several ponies, who didn't see her from her crouched position behind her book-laden wagon. As expected upon casting her spell, the unicorns that she could see began to glow brightly in her mind's eye, while the earth ponies and Pegasi remained inert, their normal colorations. Ha! She exclaimed quietly as she closed her eyes and teleported inside her wagons. See? See, Trixie? I was right! She flipped open a book of cantrips. Simple spells, usually the first that a unicorn learned after mastering their innate telekinesis. And Dad hovered repeatedly on the page that she had opened to, the Detect Magic cantrip. She knew the spell of Heart by course, but she had opened it and reread every line several times over to make absolutely certain she hadn't been getting it wrong all these years. And she hadn't. Earth ponies and Pegasi don't glow, she said. They do not have magic. The spell is called Detect Magic, and it doesn't detect them, so they're not magic. She paused after hearing her own words. Not that there's anything wrong with that, she exclaimed. There isn't! She dug out a mirror from a pile of books and down to hoof at. You are not a tribalist, Twilight Sparkle, just for stating a fact. Nobody would call you a tribalist for saying that only Pegasi have wings, or only Earth ponies have... She paused, tapping a hoof to her mouth. Whatever it is Earth ponies have! Oh no! Twilight leaned away from the mirror in horror. I can't think of anything that's uniquely Earth pony. Maybe I am a tribalist! Twilight took a moment to think about that, then shook her head and jabbed a hoof at the mirror again. No, you're not. It's just Trixie messing with you, trying to make you look bad, because she is the jealous one! Twilight nodded in realization. Maybe not jealous, maybe scared. Scared of the fact that you're a much better sorceress than she is! Twilight began pacing around the small confines of her wagon, the collected work of the past several years wandering around Equestria, diving headfirst into magic, learning every spell she could. She had traveled to Manhattan, to Philadelphia, to Tottenham, to Stalingrad, practically laying siege to the great libraries of Equestria, devouring all the knowledge of magic that every major library had made available to the public, and even some of which were supposed to be off-limits without special permission. Usually, she had submitted a request to Canterlot and received that permission. Sometimes she hadn't gotten it, and once or twice she hadn't let that stop her. It was amazing how poorly prepared to deal with teleportation most of Equestria was. She was trying to learn everything about magic, after all. She couldn't let little things like locks and bars and curses and the Equestrian legal code to get in the way. Twilight stopped pacing, looking back to the mirror. Wait, she said. Wait. Trixie doesn't know what kind of sorceress you're like. She's seen you like, what, teleport? Twilight shook her mane. Teleporting's easy. And Trixie's special talent is magic, so... Twilight considered. Ha! Of course! This is all a test! Twilight pranced around in a place a little when she realized. Duh, it's obvious. Of course Trixie wouldn't bring out her full potential for a silly little carnival like this. Why waste the effort? She didn't expect to have me in the audience. She expected little foals. And who knows how many ponies before me have tried to learn what she knows about magic. She doesn't know me from any other two-bit unicorn magician that comes crawling to her looking for attention. She must only accept the best. Twilight paused that. I am the best, she said in a low voice, dangerously devoid of emotion. She looked around the mess of books that was her wagon, frantically trying to find some form of inspiration. She would need something big to make up for acting like such a fool in front of Trixie. Something huge. Something gargantuan. Something... Twilight's eyes settled on one book. Creatures of the Everfree Forest. One of her new magical tomes. Displayed brazenly on the cover was a mythologic beast. A purple and transparent bear studded with stars. An Ursa Major. The Everfree was just outside of town. Twilight Sparkle grinned. Trixie had just reached Twilight Sparkle's wagon, parked near the Ponyville library, when there was a familiar pink flash from inside it, along with a faint popping sound. Eyebrow arched slightly. She raised a hoof and knocked 3 times on the wagon's entrance. Hello? She asked. Twilight Sparkle? There was no answer. Trixie tried knocking again. Twilight, are you in there? It's Trixie! She paused a moment to wait for a response, but got none. I'm going to open the door, okay? Trixie did so, surprised to find it unlocked. Inside the wagon, there was probably a bed and a dresser, but most of the space was taken up by books of every size, shape, and color, and binding. some stacked in neat piles, some thrown haphazardly across the floor, some sitting on shelves that looked ready to burst. Horn glowing to provide light as the wagon's door closed behind her. Trixie found that most of the books were about spells and magical theory, with long-winded, often alternative titles. In fact, Trixie couldn't find a single book that wasn't about magic. Not just by glancing around, anyway. Trixie frowned a little when she found a journal, plopped open on Twilight's bed, or on something that was probably a bed underneath all the books it was buried under. She felt a slight sense of invasion as she leaned down to look at it, but quickly found there was no need. The page it was open to contained a sketch of a magic circle, arcane runes, and notes about how they interacted with each other. Flipping through the pages, she found no personal entries, no comments about seeing a cute stallion or mare, about being overcharged for buying something in a town, not even something so inconspicuous as a comment as, "It was a sunny day today," or, "I saw a bird. It was pretty." The journal said absolutely nothing about Twilight Sparkle's life. Or, on the other hand, she had found out about everything about Twilight Sparkle's life. This unicorn didn't just have a talent for magic, from the looks of things. She had an obsession. There was nothing else in her existence besides learning more and more magic, more spells. Twilight Sparkle wasn't a unicorn. She was a machine. Information went in, application came out, occasionally, but only after rigorous study, dissection, and experimentation. Twilight Sparkle didn't have a life. She had an existence, and that was it. It was a wholly depressing thought, enough to make Trixie turn around and start to leave the unicorn's wagon. Dark humor turning around her head. "Dear Princess Luna," she mentally composed, "today I found something horrifically depressing. I might kill myself now, so you should probably start looking for a new representative of your court to Ponyville and a new apprentice. I recommend a unicorn named Twilight Sparkle, but I think she'd drive you to suicide as well. Your faithful corpse, Trixie." The blue unicorn stopped, however. Her horn's glow at last fell on something that wasn't about magic. Pinned to the back of the wagon's door, a pair of photographs, one of a white-coated mare with a white and purple mane, and the other of a blue-coated stallion with a darker blue mane. Both unicorns. The family resemblance was obvious. These were probably Twilight's parents, then. "Huh," Trixie observed, in a quiet voice, as he inspected the photos. Sitting beneath it was a well-worn book, set into its own special shelf that even Twilight's journal hadn't received. What surprised Trixie was that she recognized the book. Don Quixote of Equestria. It was one of the most beloved tales of all time, a farce and a comedy, also a little bit of tragedy. It was, most importantly of all, given the wagon it found it in, a work of complete fiction. Trixie owned the same book. Not the same edition, from the looks of the cover, not even the same publisher. The book had been in the public domain for centuries, but the same fundamental story. Trixie used her telekinesis to lift the book from its stand and open it up, and honestly expected to scrawl a link from Twilight's quill inside of it, complaining about unrealism or making commentary about how magic doesn't work this way or that way. Instead, she found a wholly unblemished tone, apart from the effects of age and what looked like marinara sauce stain about halfway through. Trixie blinked at the sight of it, before feeling the invasion of privacy came back with a vengeance. And this time, nothing came along to stop it. She set the copy of Don Quixote back where she had found it, and quickly made her way from Twilight's wagon, shivering a little. Trixie didn't know her father, and her mother had died not long after she was born, but that never bothered her. She had been raised by her Aunt Moonsinger, a unicorn, and her mother's sister, an uncle, Sky Sharpener, a Pegasus, and to her they were her parents. And at some point, around the time Twilight's parents had given her a copy of Don Quixote, Trixie's uncle and aunt had given her the same book. It was unnerving. Here was Trixie the extrovert, and there Twilight the introvert. Here was a blue unicorn who desperately wanted to stop driving ponies away from her. There was a violet one who, from the looks of things, just wanted to be left alone. Here was the personal student of Princess Luna. There was the only unicorn in history of Equestria to leave Luna's School of Magic with a perfect grade point average, and a year early besides. Yet, both had the same book given to them as foals. No doubt the same book had sharpened their outlooks on life, and turned them into the mares they were today. "Discord's mismatched horns," Trixie thought. "There's a chance that my aunt and uncle met Twilight's parents at the bookstore." It wasn't hard to imagine that its circumstances had been only a little different. Twilight could have been the element of magic, surrounded by friends, while Trixie wandered the land in her wagon, always alone. The blue unicorn realized that her trotting away from Twilight's wagon had turned on to a full-on gallop, and stopped herself with only a deliberate effort, turning around and finding herself more than a while from the Ponyville library. I screwed up again, Trixie thought to herself. It was a familiar thought, one she had a lot in Canterlot, but had come surprisingly less often in Ponyville. It felt almost like an old friend, or at least something considered itself an old friend, no matter what Trixie herself thought of it. I screwed up again. Twilight just wanted to do what she does, the only thing she knows how to do. Information goes in, application comes out. She didn't mean to interrupt my show. She didn't mean to be unpleasant to me. It probably never even entered her mind. Because of that, I manipulated things so that she ended up looking like a bigoted, awful mare. Congratulations. You've managed to drive away some pony and ruin their lives at the same time. Well done, oh great and powerful Trixie. Was there any doubt? Trixie began galloping again, back to Twilight's wagon. The library unicorn would have to come back at some point, and when she did, Trixie would be waiting. Deleted scene. Busted. The Lost Tales by Errol Bookwise. Chapter 3.4. Crazy Little Thing Called Sirens. The early night was dark. Beneath the shadows of the gnarled trees of the evergreen forest, where the stars and moon could not reach, it was even darker. It was as though this darkness had crept a single beacon, a vibrant magenta glowed, projected by the unicorn's horn, as its lavender-coated owner made a slow but deliberate pace through the foliage and underbrush. Every so often the mare would stop, or point her horn forward, then swing her head from left to right and back again, as though searching out which direction triggered her greatest response before resuming her march. Twilight Sparkle was a unicorn on a mission, a quest, a crusade, and somewhere in this forest lay the answer that would solve all her problems. Soon she would be able to prove her worth, face down this trial, and pass the test. Yes! Test! Twilight was good at tests. She never failed, and tonight would be no different. She just had to find the... That was when she heard it, and paused briefly, her ears twisting about to discern the sound. It wasn't any sound she would have expected from her intended mark, or any other beast in the forest. No, this was something different, musical, song-like, hauntingly beautiful even. Twilight didn't care. She only had a singular goal this night. Nothing would distract her, and so she resumed her steady trudge. Yet, as she made her way over the muddy and moss-carpeted ground, weaving between trees and ducking branches that tore her increasingly disheveled mane, the sound only grew louder and more insistent. She paused, once again, lowering her horn and turning her head to check the path. Well, it's along the same route, she said to herself, and I can spare a few minutes to investigate while I'm here. As she made her way further along, she could make out the words, lyrics however. Something was definitely singing. Oh please, don't decline. Come and dance on the river's bed. Well, it wasn't quite singing. Twilight was no musical expert, but she tried to keep herself well read on a wide variety of subjects. Magic was her talent, passion, life. But any good scholar needed to maintain a well-rounded foundation of more general knowledge, to steadily converse with others of high education, if nothing else. No, this wasn't a proper song, not as defined by modern standards at least, more like the steady rhythmic beating of a pre-classical Cavalian chant. She actually preferred such as compared to the more contemporary works. Not only was its value to the arts backed by centuries of academic study and acknowledgment, but its evenly measured rhythmic pace was decidedly sensible, not at all like the blaring cacophonic gravitons of modern so-called musical artists. Ha! This was proper art, precise and categorical. Twilight made a mental note. She would have to try her hoof at writing a Cavalian chant one day. It would be a good meditative exercise to practice in between her other studies. Come on in. The water's fine. Please, oh please, don't decline. As he drew closer to the chant's source, the lyrics became ever clearer, and Twilight could now make out the sound of running water, a river of some kind. And now that she heard it clearly, she wasn't sure how she had missed it before. She also had noticed the chant was timed evenly, with the water's steady flow, and the two distinct sounds blending into a unified whole. Twilight was actually becoming quite eager to meet whatever talent was behind this masterpiece, and so picked up her pace. She even allowed her original purpose in coming to the forest to slip to the back of her mind, not forgotten, but less insistent. Come and dance on the river's bed. Come on in and join the dead. Okay, that last part was a little morbid, she thought to herself as she slowed to a stop. Then again, wasn't good art supposed to be moody? True art is angsty, after all. Were not so many of the classic epic tales tragedies? Of course, that's all it was. Even in a place as unnatural as the Everfree, full of so many monsters, a thing of such refinement couldn't possibly bear any real malice. Besides, even if it did, no mere beast of the night was a match for Twilight Sparkle and her mastery of the arcane arts. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out and into the clearing that the river had cut through the forest. Hello? All was still and silent for a moment. Before her, Twilight saw a trio of aquatic equines basking in the river's cool water beneath the moonlight. Instead of furry coats, they had scales. Where a pony would have a mane, these creatures had fins, and with similar fins attached to their forehooves, while their hindquarters seemed to taper off into a fish-like tail beneath the river. Although they were a slightly different shade of green, other than the fact that one had a stallion-like build, while the other two were more mare-like. The most individually distinguishing characteristic was their brightly colored eyes. Teal for the first, and yellow-red for the other two. The trio made no immediate reply, only staring back and forth amongst each other before resuming their chant. Come on in. The water's fine. Please, oh please, don't decline. Come and dance on the river's bed. Come on in and join the dead. Tolly smiled gently. My, that really is a nice chant. A bit dreary, maybe, but luckily insightful. So again, silence was her only response. Then the one with red eyes turned to her compatriots. It's not my fault this time. My harmony has been spot on for weeks. Even if this is another musical pony, our song should work perfectly. Well, if it's not you, then what is it? Spoke the yellow-eyed creature in a critical tone. Red Eyes were snapped a sharply hairless defensive reply. How should I know? Maybe you're the one who's screwing up this time. As if. You're just trying to make excuses to cover your own shouty voice work. Pipe down, the two of you. The teal-eyed creature interjected as it swam between the two. I've got a much simpler way to figure this out. Then, turning to Twilight, gave a shout. Hey, you! Unicorn! So why exactly is our siren song not working on you? Twilight wasn't sure she liked the implication of what these three were discussing, but couldn't resist the urge to show off a bit. Oh, that's easy. I had to be pretty stupid to go hiking in some places dangerous as the Everfree without casting a few protective wards. Teal Eyes gave a satisfied nod and turned to his compatriots. See you two? It's no one's fault. The unicorn is just using magic to protect herself. Getting a bit frustrated with having twice now being referred to as submissively as a unicorn, Twilight coughed to catch the trio's attention. Ahem! I have a name. It's Twilight Sparkle and... Like we care what our dearest name is, interrupted Red Eyes, but then paused before continuing. Though, I guess, with other spells that you have cast, you're off the menu. Now, why does he just run along so we can get back to our siren song before we starve? It finished with a dismissive wave of a fine hoof. Twilight was definitely getting uncomfortable with being treated as a literal hunk of meat. But with her wards in place, and the trio of waterbound, she knew she was safe enough. Besides, there was something nagging at her that she had to assert. Yeah, about that actually. If you beg my pardon, it's not really accurate to call it a siren song, now is it? What do you mean? Said Yellow Eyes, with a raised eyebrow and mild irritation at the end of her voice. Of course it's a siren song. We're sirens, and that's our song. Simple as that. Now Twilight grinned as he straightened her posture and took a properly informative tone. Well, first off, it was more of a chant. Not quite chameleon, but similar enough. Great, drawled Red Eye sarcastically. It is another music pony. Who, me? came Twilight Seeper's reply. No, I dabble in a bit of everything, but my real talent is magic. And as if to prove it, she turned slightly to show off her starburst cutie mark. What? You mean that freaky tattoo fetish you ponies have is actually supposed to mean something? Well, it's not a tattoo. They're called cutie marks and sorry. Red Eyes interrupted again, in a tone that conveyed very much the opposite. Don't care! Now then, since you clearly don't know what you're talking about, why don't you leave it to us professionals to decide whether what we do is chanting or singing? Then gave another dismissive wave. Well, I doubt that any of you have an actual degree in the musical arts, Twilight growls. But fine, call it what singing if it makes you happy. The real problem is you aren't sirens. Teal Eyes' head cocked sideways a bit. Come again? You are not sirens. She replied with extra emphasis. Great. Now she's a zoologist. Probably another ignoramus that thinks we're sea ponies, added Yellow Eyes, now obviously annoyed and agitated. I'll tell you what we told the last nutter who tried telling us that. This here is freshwater, and we are certainly no herbivores. Ignoramus? Nutter? Twilight would show them. She had a point to prove after all. No, of course not. Then she proceeded in an escalating electric tone. You are most certainly not sea ponies, or more accurately, you aren't hippocampus. Notably, while aquatic, hippocampus still have mammalian qualities. Also, while the hippocampus does prefer saltwater, they have been known to form freshwater colonies in larger lakes. I don't know where you get your info, lady, quipped Yellow Eyes. But we've seen hippos before. They live down south in zebra territory. Oh yeah, remember our summer vacation 2 years back? Added Red Eyes while licked her lips. That was good eats. They'll stuff for weeks. Then rolled back to stroke her belly. That's not what she said. Teal Eyes interjected. She means those pony griffin half-breeds. Some griffin would taste good too right about now, Red declared with a toothy grin in her eyes. Wow, no, you're all wrong, proclaimed Twilight, then glancing at Red Eyes. Except you, you're just creepy. The conversation was getting decidedly more awkward by the minute, but she couldn't just leave without first enlightening these poor deluded creatures. I don't know about you, Twilight, but I'm loving this. First of all, she said, looking at Yellow Eyes, what you are trying to refer to is the hippocampus. Second, she turned to Teal Eyes, you were talking about the hippogriffs. What I said was hippocampus. It's the technical term for sea pony. All right, fine. So what if sea ponies have a fancier name? Teal Eyes replied bluntly. We all seem to agree that that's not what we are anyway. So if you already know we aren't sea ponies, what makes you so certain we aren't sirens? Well, for one, like your companion already pointed out, this is freshwater. And true sirens would live in salt water. Second, while they, like many fish, have like qualities, true sirens would be anthropidal, much like minotaurs or kobolds, not equinoid. Lastly, you, see, Twilight fixed her gaze firmly on Teal Eyes, are clearly a male. Right, drawled Yellow Eyes sarcastically. The sirens are all girls' crud. Then with dull exasperation, like we haven't heard that one before. How Brady would even work that way? Easy, Twilight said with a grin, then turned straight from her mouth and into her twinkling eyes. Despite appearances, a true siren would actually be asexual. Oh, give me a break! Shouted Red Eyes. I don't care how often they get it on. They aren't going to make no eggs without any guys. That was a double negative, Twilight corrected. But more important, the term asexual has nothing to do with how often a species engages in mating practices. It means they don't have separate males and females. What? Yellow Eyes blinked furiously, as though trying to comprehend the idea was too much for her. That makes even less sense. Yeah, I'm not buying it either. Have you even met one of these no boys or girls so-called real sirens? Well, no. Twilight could see it a bit sheepishly, as he flattened her ears and tucked in her tail. But it's not like I could anyway. They're extinct. The last true siren died off years ago. From what I've heard, there were 3 others, but they got banished to another dimension by stars so to be it. Yellow Eyes let out a distinct snort. So much for that no guys thing working out for them. Seems to me that if all these real sirens you keep weathering about died out, then there's no reason we can't be the new sirens. Teal Eyes grinned impressed. Besides, if you've never seen them with your own eyes, exactly how can you know they even ever existed in the first place? With that, Twilight's confidence returned a dozenfold. Books! She beamed. Books can be wrong. Twilight stared wide-eyed in shock and gave a single twitch of her right ear, then grit her teeth as she issued a ghastly rasp. Not my books! She could feel it, an inferno welling up deep inside her, an emotion that threatened to transcend and make itself physically manifest. How easy it would be just to give in to that sensation, to watch these creatures burn. But no. These were just poor, ignorant souls living in the untamed wilds of Everfree. They understood not the wretched blasphemy they spoke, and she was Twilight Sparkle. She would not incinerate, no. She would educate. And with that, the storm passed as quickly as it begun, allowing her to regain her composure, as though she had never lost it. A single hoof reached absently to snuff out the small flame at one of the frayed tips of her mane. Then she proceeded in a chipper tone. I've made sure to double and triple check the citation sources for every last book in my collection to ensure authorial accuracy. All right then, Miss Smarty Pants, sneered the yellow-eyed creature. If we aren't sirens or sea ponies, then what exactly do you think we are? That's easy. Twilight's answer came matter of fact. Kelpies. What? Red Eyes barked out a laugh. Okay, now I know this unicorn staffs. She thinks we're seaweeds. That's kelp, moron, sighed Yellow Eyes as he minded slapping her compatriot upside the head. But she's still a loon. We don't look a damn thing like those freaky black land dwellers. What? Twilight puzzled, having been finally fully caught off guard for the first time in the conversation. Then, after a moment's consideration, her eyes lit up with a solution. Oh, I get it. Well, to be more precise, you are... I hate you. Nako Instro Kelpies. While these other creatures you're discovering have been Yusi Kelpies. The species name is the same, but they come from different phylums. In fact, those creatures are actually a variety of fae from the order of emotion eaters. Specifically, they're verivores, or fear eaters. Most specifically, the fear that precedes sudden untimely death. Twilight was beginning to suppress a shudder at the unpleasantness of thinking such creatures might be roaming the Everfree. Still, I'm not so sure how you could have actually met one. According to the Beast of Bedlam, there hasn't been a Yusikid seen or even anywhere near Equestria for over 200 years. See? Boasted Teal Eyes. Your books aren't perfect. Well, I suppose, but just because there might be a few undocumented Uchigas living in Everfree, I noticed Twilight very much doubted. The three by this point were grasping at straws to defend their misguided beliefs, and probably just making this stuff up. That doesn't change the fact that the three of you are Kelpies. Whatever. As fun as this little chat has been, it's done nothing for my appetite. Now, why don't you go back to wherever you came from and leave us to our thing? Actually, I have something to find on the other side of this river. And with that, all three eyes light up a wicked glee as they each flash a sharp-toothed grin. Well, why didn't you say so in the first place? Yellow Eyes stated eagerly. Yeah, Red Eyes agreed with obvious exuberance. Would have saved us all so much time and effort. Finally, Teal Eyes declared. Guess the only thing left for you is to give it a swim. Right, came Twilight's proactive response. What kind of fool do you take me for? Red Eyes licked her chops. The tasty kind of help. Twilight narrowed her gaze as she gave a harsh but mostly deadpan retort. Yeah, I don't think so. So what then? Think you can fight your way past us? Might want to reconsider. Yellow Eyes conscious with obviously false concern. We've kind of got you outnumbered. But please, don't let you talk us out of it, concluded Red Eyes. Oh, I think I'll manage. And with that, the unicorn began to charge her horn, its glow increasing from a dull magenta to an almost fiery white. At the same time, the trio began to hum in harmony, as they prepared their own musical magic to counter the unicorn's attack. Both the whites and blacks of their eyes faded away, leaving the sockets filled with only the solid-colored orbs that began to faintly glow. The fairy water about them began to bubble and churn and rise about them, lifting them toward it. Tension mounted in the air as both sides prepared for the inevitable clash until POP! Of a sudden flash, the unicorn vanished, gone from sight as though he was never there to begin with. The trio blinked, their eyes suddenly returning to normal, as they ceased their harmony. While the water around them settled back into the river, they looked confusedly between each other. Wait, Where did she go? Well, it's been fun, came a familiar voice, but now from behind. The trio turned into their combined, utterly disappointed astonishment. They saw their prey, now sleepily on the opposite bank. But I really have to get moving. As the pony disappeared past the tree line and into the darkness, the sires started to look towards each other. Well, that went swimmingly. So what now? Intoned Red Eyes with a bit more of a grumble. I'm still hungry. Let's go upstream, Teal Eyes suggested. See if Steven's got any good scraps. Red Eyes looked a bit disappointed, but conceded, well, it's better than nothing. As they swam off, Teal Eyes asked, so, do any of you actually buy what the unicorn's saying? Heck no, Yellow Eyes commented. What do ponies know anyway? Yeah, they'd be useless. Red Eyes then flashed a razor-eyed smile as he finished. If it weren't beat how tasty they were. And with that, all three enjoyed a night of shared laughter before swimming off in earnest and into the night. And now, back to Boast Busted. Twilight's mane and coat were both a little disheveled from trotting through the ever-free forest, having been caught a few times on thickets and twigs. But she didn't let her appearance bother her, as she moved with determination, horn glowing brightly as she repeated the chanted words of the finder smell. From the mental pulse her horn was giving off, as she was getting close to, a cockatrice leapt from a nearby bush in front of Twilight and screamed, eyes of his rooster head glowing red. Twilight didn't even slow down or look directly at it as her telekinesis grabbed the cockatrice and hurled it high in the air, its shriek changing from one of challenge to fright being so casually tossed aside. The unicorn was getting close to her destination and really didn't need to be distracted right now. In fact, just to prevent further distractions, Twilight teleported the rest of the way, trusting her abilities to carry her safely to near wherever the Ursa lay. Her trust was well founded. With a pop and a flash of light, Twilight appeared in front of a truly massive cave opening, and the pulse of her finder spell went into overdrive. Chuckling to herself, the unicorn proceeded in, though she made her horns glow dimly as considerably as he did. Her eyes were pricked high and alert, while her eyes scanned the shadows, looking for any sign of a hornet's height finally fell across something that wasn't merely rock or lichen. At first, all Twilight saw was a field of speckled white and blue, translucent fur, like looking at the night sky. But as she continued to walk forward, she saw more of a vast creature in front of her. White, sharp claws, a black nose, and an 8-pointed star placed firmly on its forehead. Best of all, it was asleep. That was perfect. Not just because it made the Ursa significantly less likely to eat Twilight. The lavender unicorn closed her eyes tightly, horn glowing, as he reached out with a sweet, honey-scented flavored magical aura, which closed around the beast's head like a halo. The spell she was casting over the sleeping, gigantic bear was fantastically illegal for her to know. It had been one of those cases where she had broken into a library's sealed vaults and read the grimoire it came by a furtive hornlight. Twilight had never planned on using it before today, and she certainly never planned on using it on other ponies. But in Ursa, that was different. After several long minutes of concentration, Twilight's eyes opened again, and at the same time, so did the Ursa's. It looked at Twilight, but its eyes were unfocused and glossed over as though it wasn't really seeing anything, which was technically true. The Ursa was still, technically speaking, asleep and was unaware of the world around it. It was essentially sleepwalking, with only Twilight's mind, rather than the Ursa's, directing it. The lavender unicorn smiled as he poured more magic into the spell, making the Ursa stand up and begin taking long, lumbering steps forward on all four paws and out the cave with Twilight in tow. Twilight's grin widened as she and her Earth-sign companion made their way to Ponyville. The way she saw things, there were two possibilities. Either Trixie was trusting her, in which case a powerful enchantment and display of her reservoirs of magic, this spell required a continuous influx of Eldritch energy, would certainly allow Twilight to pass the test. Or else, Trixie was a blowhard fraud who didn't really deserve the element of magic, in which such a display of power on Twilight's part would get Trixie to admit that, and apologize for the way she treated Twilight. At which point, she would return the Ursa to... The unicorn stumbled a little while walking. She paused in her trot, shaking her head to clear it. She stumbled over a root, one that was large and should have been fairly obvious with her horn glowing to provide illumination, not to mention the natural soft glow that the Ursa itself had. Twilight realized that her eyelids felt a little heavy. Blinking, she teleported atop the Ursa's back, resolving to ride him into Ponyville. Probably would make a better impression anyway. The spell was a little more exhausting to maintain than Twilight had anticipated, But surely there would be no problem as long as she didn't tire herself without walking, or keeping her eyes open. Trixie wasn't a mare who could easily sit still and do nothing, so she had been spending the past hour outside Twilight's lagoon practicing her illusions. In this case, she created a deck of 54 playing cards and a six-sided die, and was playing a private variant of solitaire, just as she invented for her illusions. She was also losing. The illusory die didn't seem to like her much, and Trixie couldn't help but wonder if it had anything to do with her current frame of mind. Still, Trixie hated losing, especially to herself at a game she had invented. So, in a way, it was a welcome relief when she heard a scream of terror. Trixie blinked, looking up and allowing her game to dissolve in blue ether. In the moments, she was on her hooves and running towards the source of the screams, back toward the Eventime festival proper. A quick glance at the position of the moon revealed it to be in half an hour before midnight. The blue unicorn stumbled over a little something as he ran. A shallow pit that appeared in the dirt rose of Ponyville. She frowned at the sight of it and resumed growling, only to stumble upon again another pit. By the time she hit the third, she stopped running and took a moment to look around, horn glowing brightly to provide more illumination than the moon and stars were able to by themselves. Some pony had been digging shallow pits at regular intervals through Ponyville's West Main Road. Had probably been able to get away with it because every pony was at town center right now. Trixie climbed out of the latest pit, looking around. They almost looked like footsteps. It was round then she heard a roar. A very, very loud roar that completely overrode the sentient part of her brain and sent her scurrying into a nearby bush for cover at the sound. It was several long moments before, though, it was possible for the blue unicorn again, and several more before she was composed enough to emerge from her hiding spot and begin charging towards the center of town. The source of the roar was not hard to spot. It was a gigantic blue mare with a translucent star-studded hide. Reared up on its hind legs, it began to look around menacingly. Ponies everywhere were scattering at the sight of it, practically trampling each other down. Trixie had almost resolved to do the same thing, when she spotted her, a purple unicorn with a deep blue mane, lying prone at the feet of the bear, eyes closed, though breathing steadily. The base didn't seem to notice Twilight sparkle beneath its feet, but that didn't mean the unicorn was even remotely safe. Trixie grimaced as he began charging forward, the stampede of ponies eagerly parting to get around the seemingly suicidal princess, student of Luna. "Whoa there!" A voice came from above Trixie as she ducked into a tent, while the giant bear casually knocked over a stand of cherries, and finding that it liked the action, and proceeded to do likewise to all the stalls within its reach. Trixie looked up and saw raindrops, hovering in place behind the tent. "Where do you think you're going?" Trixie pointed to Twilight Sparkle. "I am trying to save the napping idiot," she said. The two ponies were about 100 feet from the bear, who was having too much fun causing destruction to notice them. Raindrops pointed her wings with her hoof while scoffing slightly. "Yeah, no. I'm the one who can fly out of reach." "But you're a slow flyer," Trixie pointed out. "I can turn invisible." Raindrops didn't argue the point. She looked around for a few moments at the debris that had been tossed over in their direction, and sailing along a large toy X from one of the game stalls. "Okay," she said, hefting it before launching herself straight up into the air. No, not before calling down. "I hope you know what you're doing, Trixie!" "Me too!" Trixie decided, as she wrapped the illusions around herself, bending light around her body, cape, and hat, turning her into nothing more than a smudge in reality. Then began galloping forward as fast as she dared. As she got near the bear, an axe flew down from overhead and knocked the bear on top of its head. Frankly, given its size, Trixie was surprised it had even noticed. But the bear did indeed look up. It saw raindrops silhouetted against the moon. "Hey, ugly!" The jasper-colored Pegasus shouted at Ursa. "Hi!" The bear roared, charging to get directly underneath raindrops and rearing up on his hind legs, swiping at her. She was too far off the ground, however, her wings beating furiously to make sure that even if the bear was smart enough to try jumping for her, it still wouldn't reach her. Trixie, meanwhile, had reached Twilight Sparkle's side. She didn't appear injured, at least, as Trixie used her telekinesis to heft the fallen pony onto her back and gallop away, letting her invisibility spell fade just as she reached an alleyway. On reaching it, she waved to Raindrops, who spotted her and nodded as she remained stationary, more than 100 feet up. The bear looked increasingly angry, but so far couldn't seem to think of any way to get the annoying Jasmine Pegasus. Trixie turned back to regard the bear after depositing Twilight in the relatively safety of the alley. What was this thing? Why had it wandered to Ponyville? It seemed just as confused as Trixie was to find itself in the middle of a pony town. The unicorn steeled herself as she went through every spell she knew. Sooner or later, the bear was going to get tired of trying to reach raindrops. When that would happen, it would go back to destroying everything, or grabbing a midnight smack, in the form of any ponies it would chase down. Unfortunately, though Luna had trained her in the basis of combat magic, Trixie never had a flair for it. More importantly, she never expected to fight something that was bigger than most of the abilities in Ponyville. A voice said from behind Trixie. The unicorn looked and saw Twilight's eyes flaring open as the mare rubbed her head. Ow! Trixie rushed up to the unicorn. Twilight! She exclaimed. You're the one who's been doing nothing but learning spells! The unicorn's eyes locked into Trixie. Oh, she said, her voice dried. It's you. You know, without any further escaping commentary, was scored by the bear growling, drawing Trixie and Twilight's attention. It had settled down on all fours again, glaring up at raindrops, but looking like it was trying to decide whether raindrops was worth the effort anymore. So, that's happening, Trixie announced, turning back to Twilight, who was staring with wide eyes and flopped ears. Any ideas? Twilight blinked several times. But how could this have happened? She demanded, her hose at her mouth in horror at the sight of the bear. The Ursa was... No pony cares how this thing got here, Trixie exclaimed. We just need to get rid of it before it destroys Ponyville. I don't think I know any spells big enough, do you? Twilight's eyes were still firing in shock. Maybe... Teleporting! How about teleporting? Could you teleport it? What? No! Twilight exclaimed, running her hose through her already disheveled mane. I mean, maybe! Maybe if I had time to gather the power to move something so massive. Time? Trixie asked. How much time? Twilight started using her hose to draw numbers, variables, and mathematical symbols in the dirt. Well, if I carry the 2 divide... No, wait, what was I supposed to... We don't have time for math! Trixie exclaimed. Give me a guess! Twilight looked up, somehow even more horror on her face. Guess? Guess? She demanded. I don't make guesses, There was a roar. Trixie and Twilight both turned to see that beast, apparently an Ursa. And Twilight's explanation was anything to go by. It turned around, and was looking at both of them, seeming to be very annoyed at the sight of the 2 unicorns. 5 minutes, Twilight sparkled guessed, closing her eyes and her horn glowing. Trixie grimaced, summoning all the bravery she could. She charged forward at the Ursa, horn glowing beneath her hat. What are you doing? Raindrops called down, eliciting a glare from the Ursa, but not otherwise drawing its attention away from Trixie. Buying Twilight Sparkle time! Trixie shouted back as she skidded to the halt in front of the Ursa and made her horn flash. She disappeared from sight for a brief second, and when she reappeared, she had been replaced by 5 identical copies, each of whom scattered and began running in circles around the Ursa. It roared in confusion and frustration, beginning to stomp its forelegs at the Trixies, as well as stomp at them with their teeth. Each time it managed to grab one, the Trixie it hit would disappear in a puff of blue-tinted smoke. Eventually, there was only one left, and Ursa seemed immediately pleased with itself as it brought its paws down on the final Trixie, only to have that one disappear as well. Rather than leave a Trixie-colored stain on its coat and ground, the Ursa roared in frustration. The real Trixie, meanwhile, had been hard at work after turning herself invisible again. She knew only one decent, purely combat-related spell, how to summon a bolt of lightning. The downside was that she wasn't certain she could create a cloud, and therefore a lightning bolt, large enough to cause significant damage to such a huge creature. The upside was that there was a weather pony floating in the sky, right over Trixie, in the Ursa's head. Using her Pegasus abilities to build the cloud up from a tiny wisp Trixie had put together into a building-sized nimbus, just waiting to release its stored charge. The Ursa noticed the cloud, just as raindrops landed atop it and gave it a good, solid buck with its hind legs. The yellow-white bolt of lightning arced from it and struck the Ursa. And singed its fur. Slightly. Worse, the discharge rendered Trixie visible again, as the cloud began to dissipate. Trixie said, as the Ursa began to regard her again. this time not looking particularly annoyed at all. Absolutely furious and ready to tear her apart, yes, but not annoyed. Trixie gave the bear a polite smile, then began to gallop right at it. Eyes closed as her horn glowed again. Yrsa had apparently not expected this move. It reared up in surprise, and Trixie managed to shoot between his legs. Any more plans? Raindrops called down. Don't die! That's my master plan right now! Trixie exclaimed as the bear began turning. A ponderous respect for its given its sheer mass. Telekinetically, Trixie hefted the remains of a nearby pear stall and threw them at the Yrsa, succeeding in her brilliant gambit to make it more angry. With a roar, it charged. Hasn't it been 5 minutes yet? Trixie demanded, as he squeezed her eyes shut and released a burst of light, as bright as a magnesium flare from her horn. Upside! The bear roared in pain as it stumbled in its charge, pawing at his eyes. Downside! Trixie fell to the dirt road as well, hosed at her eyes. She gingerly opened them and found that she could see vague outlines and colors, but nothing else. That was despite closing her eyes in preparation for a burst of light. Groaning, the unicorn shut her eyes again, picked a direction, and started galloping, right into a large, fuzzy mass. Eep! She shrieked as she forced her eyes open, in time to see something blue and white and large swipe at her. She ducked what she assumed was the Ursa's claw and began galloping again, only to trip and stumble over a ruined stall, getting tangled up in its banner and landing face first in what smelled and tasted suspiciously like apple pie. Great! I am going to die, and Carrot Top is going to think my last action was to pick out on something made by her biggest rival, provided the Ursa leaves a body behind, which it won't. I don't even like pie! Trixie forced her eyes to both open and focus, and saw the Ursa standing up, roaring in furor as it rubbed its damaged eyes, then brought both of them in focus on the target of all its hate. Trixie kicked her hooves furiously, trying to untangle herself from the Apple family's banner, and failing miserably. The Ursa began its charge. It was then surrounded by a violet aurora. It stumbled slightly at the sensation, as the aurora flared a moment, and then there was a large splash and pop. The Ursa disappeared from sight, following it with a stiff breeze as the air rushed to fill the black vacuum of sudden disappearance left behind. Trixie looked back to the alley where she let Twilight sparkle. The unicorn was standing, dripping sweat and panting heavily. That, she exclaimed, is real! She didn't get to finish her proclamation, as her eyes fluttered once before she fell to the ground. Heavy tests revealed that she was definitely alive, but unconscious. Chapter 4. Run, Run Away. Trixie finally managed to untangle herself from the Apple family banner, and with help from Raindrops once the Pegasus had joined her. It still took several minutes, however, and by the time she was free, a number of ponies had begun creep back into the festival grounds, given that there was no longer a gigantic blue bear destroying it. Where did it go? One pony asked, as Trixie shook off her rear left hoof free of the streamer. This was followed by numerous questions, all of them directed at Trixie and Raindrops. But two ignored them, as they both trotted over to Twilight Sparkle, who was still passed out, and looked mostly unharmed. Trixie breathed out a sigh of relief, turning to regard the crowd. Is anybody hurt? She asked, slipping comfortably into her role of representative of the Night Court of Luna, which was her normal job in Ponyville. This usually simply meant that she served as a glorified messenger between the Ponyvillians and Luna, but in times like these, the official authority was useful. There were several minutes of low chatter between every pony as they checked each other. Fortunately, no pony seemed to have been injured by the Ursa. Trixie quickly learned that there was good reason for that. Despite its later actions, apparently the Ursa had been rather peacefully wandered in Ponyville initially, largely unnoticed to essentially the entire town being at the Eventime festival. Upon seeing its approach, most ponies had quite sensibly already fled. The remainder made good their escape once the Ursa had turned violent. Did you get rid of it? A pony, an orange colt with a green mane, asked. Before she even actively thought about it, Trixie was opening her mouth to answer yes, but then proceeded to go on about how she had been instrumental and a vital part of doing that very thing, until she saw Raindrops watching her actions slowly, left eyebrow raising about half an inch. I helped, Trixie decided after a moment, ignoring the twinge in her jaw as she turned around and pointed to Twilight, who was awake and groggily getting up onto her own four hooves, shaking her head. A look of mild panic came over her features when she saw how many ponies she was surrounded by. Trixie placed a reassuring hoof on Twilight's shoulder. But most of the credit goes to Twilight Sparkle, the mayor explained. Raindrops and I just directed Ursa, but she was the one who cast the spell that teleported away. Trixie blinked a few times, even after she finished saying that. That hadn't been as hard to admit as he thought it was going to be. Wow. Wow. A Stark Ranger colt with an orange mane said, trotting forward several places, eyes locked on Twilight. You beat an Ursa Major! An Ursa Major? Raindrops asked. An Ursa Major, the colt replied. A big bear, bigger than any other bear. The biggest bear to ever walk Agressia. Nobody but the princess is supposed to be able to beat one. Trixie pouted a little. I helped, she said in a low voice. She heard Raindrops chuckle, but decided to ignore it. Twilight closed her eyes, shaking her head. That wasn't an Ursa Major, she explained. That was just a baby, an Ursa Minor. A baby! Numerous ponies exclaimed at her statement. Trixie herself was having a difficult time comprehending that. If that's an Ursa Major, then an Ursa Minor, then what's an Ursa Major like? The lavender unicorn laughed, rubbing her hoof behind her head. You don't want to know, she responded, smiling a little and finding some inner reserve of sultriness. But trust me, I'd never be crazy enough to try and bring an Ursa Major to... Down! Her voice trailed off as she realized what she just said. Or, more to the point, implied. Eyes wide and pupils shrinking into tiny dots. Looks of furor that would have done the Ursa Minor proud began to appear on the faces of the Ponyvillians as their eyes looked unerringly into Twilight Sparkle. The lavender unicorn sputtered a little, before snapping her eyes shut, horn glowing brightly and disappearing in a flash and large pop. There was a protracted silence, before Trixie turned to Raindrops and poked a hoof where Twilight had been. That one's not my fault, she insisted. Trixie found Twilight Sparkle at the front floor of her wagon. Saddlebags slung over her back, and desperately looking between a pair of books, from the looks of things, deciding to decide which of the two thick tomes to take with her. On hearing her enter, the lavender unicorn eeped and spun around, horn glowing brightly. Stay back! Twilight ordered, I have a horn and I know how to use it! Trixie decided that, given Twilight's current frame of mind, it would be better to leave that one rather than come up with a witty response. Instead, the blue unicorn sat down just inside Twilight's wagon, closing the door behind her and taking off her hat. Full disclosure, Trixie said, there's about 100 ponies outside who are very, very upset that their evening time festival has been ruined. More will be showing up soon, so don't try to run. Ha! Twilight exclaimed, I just teleported an Ursa Minor miles out without having line of sight to where I was sending it to, and to somewhere I've only been once. You really think I'd run? Trixie sighed, waving a hoof. Fine, all right. You could teleport. You could make the perfect getaway. At which point, I write to Princess Luna about what you did, and you become a hunted criminal. Twilight stared, and for a second Trixie was worried that she had made a mistake, mentioning to the desperate pony that she could turn to Twilight into Equestria's Most Wanted. After several long moments of uncomfortable silence, however, the lavender unicorn held her head in defeat. I didn't mean to, Twilight stated, sounding exhausted, hurt, in all the other ways, like a pony at the end of a rope. I just figured you must have had unicorns coming up to you all the time, being the element of magic. So I had to impress you to make you teach me what you know. Either that or you were treating me the way you were because you were a fraud, in which case I show you what real magic was. Trixie blinked a few times, considering, before rubbing her hoof behind her head. Option 2, for the most part. Twilight locked on to Trixie. Despite being one bringing up the possibility, she seemed shocked. But you're the element of magic! The blue unicorn spent a few moments to try and figure out what the best possible way to go about this. Twilight, she said, what do you think magic is? This! Twilight exclaimed, waving a hoof around her wagon. Research! Documentation! Experimentation! Spells! You've never been much of a spellcaster, Trixie admitted sheepishly. At Twilight's uncomprehending look, Trixie pressed on. During the fight with Corona a few months ago, she destroyed the stones I thought were 5 of the elements of harmony. At that point, I was ready to just give up, to let Corona win. I'd given everything I had, and it wasn't even close enough. But then Shirley, you haven't met her. She's the element of laughter. Pointed out that Corona hadn't destroyed the elements. She destroyed a bunch of rocks. The spirits of the elements of harmony were right in front of her, and one by one, each of the 5 ponies that followed me into the everfree forest claimed their element. But Corona, well, actually me, but Corona agreed with me on this, said that it didn't matter, because we still didn't have that 6th element. But the ponies claimed they did, and it was me. They pointed out everything I'd done to help them during the lead-up to the longest night celebration, and during our time in the Everfree. They said I hadn't let them down yet, and they said they knew I wasn't going to let them down now, because they were my friends, or wanted to be my friends, despite the fact that I hadn't acted very nicely toward them. And I realized I wanted them to be my friends too. I didn't want to let them down. And that's when I learned the element of magic. Not because I used so many spells, and not because I had some kind of deep reservoir of magic to draw upon, but because I had a connection with those ponies. My friends. She scuffed a hoof on the wooden floor, Twilight's wagon, in slight embarrassment. That's what magic is. It's connections. Unicorn spellcasting is the most obvious kind of connection. When we take our inner power and cast it out into the world around us, and shape it by making connections with whatever we touch. But magic is also how a Pegasus has a connection to the air, and the clouds and the seasons, or how an earth pony has a connection to growing things. But it's more than just that, too. It's the connection between friends, family, or lovers. It's the connection a teacher has with her students, the connection a musician has with her instrument, or a weather pony with her job, a farmer and her business, a mother and her daughter, or a magician with her audience. It doesn't matter what the connection is. If it's there, it's a kind of magic. Trixie looked at Twilight hopefully. Is any of this making any sense? Twilight considered for a few moments. Not really. She decided after her ruminations, her voice deadpan. No. Trixie huffed, hopefully expressing dropping to one of annoyance. Well, too bad. I'm not explaining it again. So, what happens now? Twilight asked. As he did, her muscles tensed slightly, her head drooping a little. Clearly, she was expecting a fight, and in all honesty, Trixie's first instinct was to give her one. Instead, however, the blue unicorn sighed. I don't know. This whole situation is sort of my fault. I manipulated you into making yourself look like a tribalist, and should have treated you better. She looked at Twilight. But it's also your fault for bringing the Ursa Minor into town. I'm willing to take responsibility for my part. What about you? Twilight met Trixie's gaze, and the silence between the two of them stretched on and on. Trixie could see the gears turning in her head, and her weighing the situation carefully, trying to find a way out of the situation. After a long moment, she looked away from Trixie, eyes closed, and a look of defeat on her face. Trixie smiled at her apparent choice. You've made the right, she began, when Twilight's horn glowed. In a flash and a pop, the lavender unicorn disappeared from sight. Dear Princess Luna, as you are well aware, tonight was the Eventime Festival in Ponyville. I put on another magic show, and once again I found a captive audience. You are absolutely right about my desire for attention, and how showmanship could be an excellent outlet. The great and powerful Trixie could be a regular part of Ponyville's festivals to come. Unfortunately, I had more than just my adoring fans of Ponyville watching me. A unicorn named Twilight Sparkle had journeyed to Ponyville on hearing that I was the element of magic. She thought that because I was the element of magic, I must have been a superb spellcaster. It was distraught when she learned what was the case, enough to cause some minor interruption to my show. Unfortunately, I was not as sympathetic to her as I should have been, especially after she came backstage accusing me of being a fraud and wasting her teachings. I tried to leave the situation peacefully, but when she pursued me into that festival, old Canterlot habits came back to me, and I managed to make her seem like a tribalist to the ponies of Ponyville. I have included a formal testimony of her response in my regular report to you. Here, I just wanted to make it clear that Twilight Sparkle is not entirely responsible for what happened to Ponyville tonight. That I bear a large responsibility for goading and dismissing Twilight. I don't think she's a bad pony. She simply made a few bad decisions. Because of me. I ask you to consider that when deciding how to deal with her, when the law enforcers of Equestria catch up to her. Your faithful student and servant, Trixie. Trixie considered her letter for a moment, illuminated by the dawn's light that was coming in through her home's window. She hated having to send letters like this, ones where she was forced to admit to Luna that despite everything she was learning about not acting like a complete and total jerk about the magic of friendship, she still had a long way to go in regard. A large part of her wanted to just crumple up the letter and toss it into a fireplace. But she knew that wouldn't solve anything. Luna would find out sooner or later anyway. Putting off telling her teacher would only make her much angrier when she found out. With a sigh, Trixie took off her magician's hat, chanted a few magic words over it, and tossed the apartment she had given and her letter onto it. There was a flash, as the letter disappeared from her hat, the enchantment inside seizing it and transporting it to Luna's private study, where the princess would read in a few hours after she rose from her sleep. Though she held dominion over both sun and moon, Luna still considered herself primarily a creature of the night, so typically she slept from dawn until noon, or later she could help it. Having fulfilled her duties, Trixie slipped her hat back on her head and went back into Ponyville. The mess that the Ursa made of the town center had largely been cleaned up, or at least lured from a chaotic, widespread debris into a large pile that would be dealt with later, after everyone had slept the day away as well. Ponies were themselves not nocturnal, like Luna, but not even without the Ursa, the Eventime festival would have been enough to prompt most ponies to decide to sleep in. Some industrious pony had, from the looks of things, dragged Twilight Sparkle's wagon to that pile. Trixie could definitely understand the sentiment. Despite being perfectly functional, it belonged to a pony who had ruined what was supposed to be a time of celebration. So as far as Ponyvillians were concerned, the wagon and everything in it was so much trash. But, still, there was tremendous knowledge in that wagon. Trixie had recalled that Twilight Sparkle had been expecting her to be some mighty archmage, a sorceress supreme with magical power, second only to the princess herself. Despite her special talent being magic, however, Trixie had never been much of a spellcaster. But there was no reason that couldn't change. Twilight Sparkle might not be the last unicorn who came looking to learn something. Maybe next time, she could actually have something worthwhile to teach. Plus, Trixie supposed as she opened the doors to Twilight's wagon, there might be something I could use in my shows. Teleporting would be a neat trick. Chapter 5 Shining Armor. It was a rare thing for Shining Armor to receive a personal summons from the princess. Rarer still to receive one so early in the day. True, it was past noon, but the reigning monarch of Equestria was, by preference, nocturnal, typically going to bed almost immediately after setting the moon and raising the sun, sleeping straight through to midday. As it stood, Her Majesty couldn't have been awake for much more than an hour at this point. Not that Shining Armor meeting with the princess was a rare thing. He did so every day, in fact, as part of the general cabinet meeting of her personal staff, reporting on the defensive readiness of Camelot, both the palace and the capital city as a whole, an exercise that had once been largely a formality, but with the return of Corona had turned into a decidedly more serious endeavor. Things had been tense in Canterlot for the past few months, as nobody knew when Corona planned to strike next, or how, so all the royal guard could do was hope that they were prepared for whatever came. Still, as Shining Armor approached the core of Canterlot Castle, he was trying to remember the last time the princess had a personal audience with him. The only one he could recall was when she had appointed the captain of the royal guard, and that had been more of an interview than anything. Shining Armor was nearing his destination now, the personal offices of Her Majesty the Princess. He was passing an increasing number of the castle staff, maids and servants of course, but also members of the royal guard, dressed in armor and armed with weapons that were considerably more ornate than standard issue, but which were no less functional. He recognized each and every one, of course. They were the personal guard of the princess. He had personally hoofpicked each and every one for their skill, loyalty, and adherence to duty. This last quality was demonstrated as he approached to the doors of the princess's office. Despite recognizing who Shining Armor was, and despite his technically being their commanding officer, the Pegasus and Earth Pony who stood at the guard door both assumed a defensive posture as he approached, crossing their halberds in front of the door to challenge. He could have easily, after all, been an assassin wearing an illusion, or a changeling, or having seeped into his current form. Paranoid? Yes. But it was the job of the Royal Guard to be paranoid. Especially these two. If they hadn't reacted as they had, each of them would have found themselves off guard duty and onto latrine duty. Shining Armor stopped a respectable distance from the two. I'm here to see Her Majesty, he stated. I was summoned. The two guards looked at each other, before the Pegasus turned and opened the door, announcing Shining Armor's arrival, while the Earthpony's eyes remained fixed on the unicorn captain of the guard. After a moment, the Pegasus looked back to his captain and nodded, and the two guards stepped inside, allowing Shining Armor's entrance into the princess's office. In stark contrast to most of Canterlot, the private office of Princess Luna Equestrius was constructed from, or at least made to look like, wooden paneling, rather than the granite that most of Canterlot was made from. However, further contrasting with the blue and silver decorations strung out throughout the castle, Luna's office was decorated primarily in shades of warm and inviting reds, complementing the large fireplace that warmed it into the winter. It otherwise looked surprisingly mundane for the royal office. There were comfortable but hardly lavish cushions, sitting on either side of the normal-looking mahogany desk. Mahogany. A bookcase filled with volumes of both legal code and political philosophy. A map of Equestria and its neighbors on one wall, and various other trinkets scattered about. Both useful ones, like the abacus sitting on Princess's desk, and mere curiosities, like a buffalo peace pipe hanging around from the one wall. Oh my gosh. People, it's the abacus. It's the freaking abacus. It's been so long since I've seen an abacus in a ponyfic. I've missed you, sweetheart! For those of you who are wondering about the abacus joke, for you pony fans who have just joined in, go read Progress. Without changing a single thing about it, one could have transported the room to a normal, albeit wealthy, barrister's or bookkeeper's office in Manhattan or Stalingrad, and would not have been able to detect anything out of place. Despite all that, it wasn't the simplicity of the office that made Shining Armor pause as he entered, as he had been here before and knew what to expect. He had even anticipated seeing Princess Luna sitting on the other side of her desk, her glowing as he looked over her schedule for the day, and reports of what had occurred while he had slept. It wasn't even surprising to see that she was not wearing her black crown, or the rest of her royal regalia, though those sat nearby on a special stand prepared for them. No, the thing that caught him off guard was that Princess Luna Equestrius was wearing glasses. Thin, red-rimmed glasses that somehow managed to make the Shipper of the Moon, the caretaker of the Sun, the impossibly ancient yet eternal youthful Alicorn Princess of Equestria look almost cute. No, not going there. Not even thinking about going there! Shining Armor declared to himself sternly as he approached the desk and offered a steep bow. Your Majesty, he said, you sent for me? Luna looked up from wherever she was doing as Shining Armor bowed, and nodded as he spoke and rose from his bow. Yes, Captain, she said as he stood, walking out from behind her desk to join him. Is something the matter? Shining Armor blinked a few times, suddenly realized that he must have been staring. No, Majesty, I didn't know you needed glasses. Luna paused a moment, then chuckled slightly as her horn glowed, as he levitated the glasses off her face and set them down on her desk. I don't, but they help me concentrate on work, especially so soon after waking up, when work is the furthest thing from my mind. Yes, Majesty, Shining Armor said. What is on your mind? Several things, Luna responded, pressing her lips tightly together for a moment after doing so. Several things. Breakfast for one, but I put that off for a moment. She motioned with one hoof toward the cushion at her desk, and she herself walked over to the office's windows, ruffling her wings slightly in agitation. Please, have a seat, Shining Armor. In truth, he would have preferred to maintain standing, but when the Princess of the Night offered one seat, one took it. He settled down on the large cushions of his desk, watching Luna closely. Does this concern the Calvillian envoy that will be arriving in a few weeks, Majesty? Shining Armor asked. With Corona returned from her exile into the heart of the sun, Luna had been reaching out to various nations surrounding Equestria, looking for support and aid in finding her. First and foremost, of course, was a planned meeting with Calvillia, Equestria's coldest ally, also despite being a breakaway state. Luna shook her head and returned to regarding Shining Armor. No, your plans are to safeguard Princess Mia Mori Cadezza during her stay are exemplary. This matter, however, doesn't concern Equestria as a whole. It concerns the Starlight family. Shining Armor blinked at the mention of his own family, one of the oldest and most respected and influential families of the Night Court. His father, Nightlight, was Viceroy of Latico, one of Equestria's oldest princes in the northeast that bordered the Griffin Kingdoms, the independent nation of Griffos, and the protected city-states of Hippopotamia. Has something happened to my father? Shining Armor asked. Luna shook her head. No, your father is just fine, as your mother. For that matter, to my knowledge, your sister is alive, and unharmed as well. But this matter concerns her. Twilight? Shining Armor asked, standing suddenly and forgetting the decorum and proper etiquette at the mention of his sister. What's happened to her? Luna raised a hoof, trying to calm Shining Armor down. Please, Captain, sit down. Shining Armor obeyed, but only after a moment his gaze remained locked on Luna's. The Princess of the Night's lips were pressed tightly together as he waved for Shining Armor to at least look like he had calmed down. Last night, Luna began, Twilight Sparkle arrived at Ponyville, where she met with my student, Trixie Luamoon. Do you know of her? Shining Armor tried to stop his grimace, but failed. Yes, he said after a moment. I met her several times when she lived in the castle, though we never spoke directly. She has a memorable personality. That is a terrible way of phrasing it, yes, Luna confirmed. Shining Armor knew that Luna was rarely so kind with her adjectives. In any event, your sister met with Trixie. The meeting had not gone so well. According to my student, Twilight accused Trixie of being a two-bit head's maze and a waste of magical talent. She held up a hoof before Shining Armor could respond to that. I believe my student, Captain, but given the severity of what followed, I am arranging to have the matter thoroughly investigated, and of course I will allow the Starlights to arrange for their investigation. Severity of what followed? Shining Armor echoed. Luna winced slightly. Trixie, displaying far less control than I would like, going to your sister into making herself seem like a unicorn supremacist in front of all of Ponyville. Now, if the matter had progressed no further than this, I would not be talking to you, Shining Armor. Hostile words between two young men are not worth the attention of the Night Court, nor the Royal Guard. They're worth my attentions, Shining Armor thought. Not that he would in any way abuse his position as captain of the guard to come down on Trixie like a ton of bricks like he wanted to, but that didn't mean he wouldn't abuse it a little to get back at Trixie for doing that to his sister. Perhaps a very thorough security check next time she came to Canterlot, something inconvenient and drawn out. It was amazing what one could do when one was a part of a group that strung up the red tape. Of course, that was when Luna had specified stunk in. What happened? Luna grimaced again. There's no easy way to phrase this, she stated, so I will simply state it. Twilight Sparkle responded by going into the Everfree Forest and using fantastically illegal enchantment magic to take control of an Ursa Major. Then she proceeded to bring the Ursa Minor into the center of Ponyville. I do not know her intentions, because at that point she lost control of the Ursa Minor, and proceeded to go on a rampage through the town square, causing thousands of bits of property damage. Shining Armor stared, wide-eyed. No, he stated. Twilight wouldn't do that! There are dozens of eyewitnesses, Shining Armor. The evidence is irrefutable. Now, there are no casualties, and there are also dozens of eyewitnesses to confirm that, while Trixie distracted the Ursa Minor, your sister was able to teleport away, back into the Everfree. But then she teleported her away herself. No pony has seen nor heard from her since, but it has only been a few hours. That does not change the fact that she used illegal magic in the first place. Illegal magic she could only have learned by breaking and entering into secure vaults in one of the greatest libraries in Equestria. Luna's grin worsened. I'm sorry, Shining Armor, but under the circumstances, I have no choice but to issue an arrest warrant for your sister. And as you are aware, she is a sorceress of considerable power, so in addition to the guard, I must also involve the Shadow Pulse in this matter. Shining Armor blinked at that. Popular myth liked to paint the Shadow Pulse as Luna's personal team of ponies devoted to black operations, both within Equestria and outside, responsible for blackmail, extortion, and assassination. Shining Armor, having worked with them in the past, knew that in actuality, for the most part, being a Shadow Bolt meant long hours of investigation, surveillance, and paperwork, and that would actually be a fairly boring job most of the time. And it was further fully constrained by all the normal laws of Equestria. Ah, kind of like real spies! But one did not become a Shadow Bolt by being a desk jockey and paper pusher. They were called in only to deal with threats that the guard could not, by itself, handle. Is that really necessary? Shining Armor asked. Luna nodded morosely. It is, I'm afraid. Nothing can change that. I summoned you here personally to inform you, rather than risk letting you find out by overhearing tomorrow's gossip, or by reading tomorrow's paper. Starting Armor looked up at that. Tomorrow's? The incident happened too late at night for the news to reach Canterlot Princess. I also pulled some strings at the press. I will not stop the story from running. But I believe to have managed to convince most of the major newspapers to bury the story on page 17, or what they like, rather than the front page for now. That will not last, but it should give your family time to decide how to respond. Shining Armor nodded. Thank you, Majesty. There is no need, Shining Armor. I owe your family much, and you in particular as well. Luna eyed Shining Armor. But this also comes with an expectation. If your sister contacts you, you must inform the Shadowbolts. I want your word as a captain of my royal guard and a scion of the Starlight family. Shining Armor nodded slightly. I will, he promised. What will you do with Twilight? Luna grimaced again. That depends heavily on the circumstances surrounding her arrest. At the moment, I am willing to take her and most of the state into account, and her contribution to banishing the Ursa Minor back to Everfree. But there will be some form of punitive action, Captain. Likely several years in prison, or the very least under house arrest, in Canterlot or Latigo. The unicorn captain of the guard nodded again, still trying to wrap his mind around the idea of his sister, a little Twilight causing so much trouble. They used to be so close, but ever since he set out her journey through Equestria to learn about as much passing as possible, they begun to grow distant. Letters from her became less and less frequently, and of course, indeed, his father and mother, well, had a difficult time ever contacting her due to constantly being on the move in that caravan of hers. You must have some leave coming up, Luna said, interrupting Shining Armor's ruminations. In fact, it doesn't matter if you do. Take the next week off, Captain. Go see your family. Shining Armor started to object, but the look in Luna's eyes brokered no argument. Instead, he nodded. Yes, Majesty, I'll do that. Very good, Luna said. I'm sorry, Captain. I know this has its fears. To have a Sibley act in a way you wouldn't think possible. But Twilight has done something unforgivable. If you speak to her at all, please make sure she knows that. Shining Armor nodded, as Luna gave him leave to depart. He did so swiftly, without even acknowledging the guards on the other side of the door as he did. Letting his hose fall almost mechanically on the floor, he made his way to the princess's office. Twilight, Shining Armor thought, what have you done? And there we are, people. The big prologue. This was the pilot. The one that started it all. I know, I first started off with episode 1, but that was me. That was me reading the story. This was where everything began. Back around February of 2012, Rainbow Double Dash submitted this story to FimFiction. A little while later, it became favored and hit the feature box. And later than that, that was when the universe began. Eve started up the origin, and we got everything. So many people had come together to create this. And interestingly enough, it starts off with this little 4-chapter, chapter 5 I think was added later, story right here. So, what do I think of it personally? Well, I can see why it became popular and why I enjoyed it. It amazes me does everything that came together at this point. I mean, we only barely saw Lyra, so we didn't know much about her relationship with Bonbon at the time. The only main one that signed up with her was of course Raindrops. So she was the only one that had any character. We didn't know that much about the other Lunaverse 6 at the time. Heck, I just realized upon my second read through of this is the first time we ever heard that Charlie was the element of laughter. 4 chapters in. Beforehand, we only knew about Derpy, Trixie, Lyra, and Raindrops, and Carrot Top as the different elements. So Charlie was kind of a surprise. Also, apparently we didn't know about that bad scene that pops up in episode 1. You know the one I'm talking about. Charlie's test. Everything starts here. And for me, I'm kind of impressed with how much better he's gotten at all this. I mean, look at how much stuff he does. Granted, it's the same writing style, but somehow everything feels more improved. As I hope my reading has improved so far through the past few chapter stories and the episodes through this. And Twilight is now our final main six that we can see our difference. And for me, I think she is the biggest change from the whole entire thing. This is what Twilight would have been like without her friends, without Celestia's guiding hoof, without Spike, without Shining Armor, without Cadence, without anything. She would have been just her usual OCD, panicking, her moral, her whole entire ideals about herself drooped down to below zero self. I mean, I can still totally see where Twilight's coming from with this. Why she wanted Trixie to be better. Because Trixie's the element of magic. Imagine if Twilight, before meeting the others, saw Star Swirl for the first time. She would have been like, wait, he's not doing all this magic. Come on, test me! And we even see Twilight's usual schizophrenic less than zero self. Oh my gosh, this is a test. Of course Trixie's testing me. It's not like we haven't seen her paranoid or jump to conclusions before. Less than zero. Pinky pride. Or think something that isn't really magic before. Bro gossip. I don't see. Somebody pointed out to Twilight's tribalist. I don't see it like that. Twilight's just going, look, you are all equal, but I just don't see what real magic is. And remember, in episode 1, as far as Twilight was concerned, friendship wasn't magic. Those books were magic. Which is why I always have to laugh whenever somebody suggests, why didn't Celestia tell Twilight about the elements in the first place? Why does he have to do all that smoke and mirrors? To which I respond, this is Twilight freaking Sparkle. This is what's going to happen when you tell her the elements of harmony exist and you have to get them. Okay, don't forget to remember to make friends. What? Bye! This is what's also going to happen if you tell her to make friends. Okay, you 5 are my friends. Doodles! She's not going to learn friendship because, well, Twilight is I don't know if you know this, but Twilight's a very straightforward scientific thinker that goes by lists. She has lists to make a list to check the list. She's scientific, not emotional. So, of course, seeing Trixie doing magic with just the stage shows, it's going to think, well, jumping to conclusions like she has done before. I got so many episodes, it's not even funny. She immediately thinks, oh, this is a test. I'm going to see if Trixie is actually trying to test me. Think of it as kind of like a great warrior or somebody looking stupid, and then you decide to test them with your own skill by throwing a rock and then hitting him. It's happened before. It's a common joke, really. And how does Twilight test? Well, she goes a little overboard. But it's reasonable. She thinks she can control it. And in the end, much like with Superman and Nail, we see that Twilight is still heroic. And so is Trixie. Trixie may not be a spellcaster, but that doesn't stop her from being resourceful, intelligent, and witty, as opposed to Twilight's pure 100% grade 8 awesome. And then we see that Twilight makes a mistake by actually saying that out loud. It would have probably perfectly been fine. As a matter of fact, in a later episode, we're going to see it's perfectly fine. We're going to see how much this is not really going to be that big of an issue, other than the fact that, oh no, she gets house arrest in a freaking library. That's like telling me I'm forced to work in a game shop for about 5 years. Oh no! Don't do that! It's not like I'm an avid gamer! But I think what I also love are two things, and of course it concerns the Blue Mare. Is number one, Trixie's speech, which I think is probably one of the better ones I've given out on these live reads. What Trixie said is right, and it's something that I've noticed that not every author gets when it comes to ponies. When they write the element of magic, they think Twilight is the element of magic, and it just means, oh, well, to be the bearer of magic, you have to be really, really good at magic. No, 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 no. There's something more to it than that. You've got to consider the bonds of friendship, the bonds of the people around you, and the bonds that you can make or create. It's the bonds between, well, like Trixie said, a farmer and her business, a musician and her instruments, a Pegasus and her animals. Those bonds that create. And at that point, Twilight finally realized, in that moment, in that very moment, Twilight realized, hey, these are my friends. Hey, Shining Armor is more than just my brother, he's my friend. So's Cadence. That little dragon is not just my fax machine. He's my friend. I've made all these bonds. And Twilight, boom, realizes that that was the real magic she had learned. That was the real power. And same could be said of Trixie. That speech that Trixie gave feels so right. And another thing I like is that we're seeing more Trixie's own personal journey into being a powerful magician. While Trixie would let her ego in the main verse stop her from learning all these spells, our Trixie, Lunaverse Trixie, has decided, okay, there's this mayor out there who has learned so much. Maybe, being humble, for once, I can actually do this. Maybe I should learn something from her. And so, Trixie picks up the book and begins learning. She starts having her own character development. One that, since I haven't read all the episodes, I'm quite curious to see where it's going. Meanwhile, for Twilight, the only time I see her being really criminal is that she's bringing this on herself. And I'm sorry to say, but this is something we've seen Twilight do. Remember, Twilight has very, very huge modesty. Also, she can also proceed to beat herself up when she fails. And this, for her, is a big failure. So rather than owning up, she feels like she deserves to be on the run. She feels like she deserves everything she got. And that hurts her. And of course, we see how it hurts Shining Armor. Still, this was a wonderful pilot. Nice way to start everything off. And a fun little episode besides. Now, during the week, we're going to have more Christmas specials. But tune in next Saturday, for we will have, well, girls, what a bright sunny day. The trees are burning, the trees are singing, flowers are blooming, and there seems to be smoke. Trixie, you gotta go quick! One of the buildings on fire! Oh, okay, I got... Trixie! There's another fire over there! Okay, here's how I got... Trixie, you're never gonna blink! Let Trixie guess. It's another fire! Good golly, who is saying these things? Is that a... Pegasus? Is that a phoenix? Coming up next on the Lunaverse, where there's smoke, it's sure to be a hell of a hot time.